writer, educator, and Jeff also serves as Associate Medical Director for Patient Experience at Penn Medicine. He leads initiatives for clinicians to help improve patient-centered communication skills, and he's an instructor in the doctoring course at the University of Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you so much. That was a very kind introduction.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you accepted our invitation. And I wanted to start by asking you to, well, tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to pursue a career in medicine.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm grateful and really honored to be your guest here tonight. I guess I came to medicine in a relatively traditional way. I grew up in upstate New York. I had a physician uncle who was actually my pediatrician growing up. And, I was kind of intrigued by him for a while. And I had a penchant for the sciences, and in high school and in college, I was drawn to science, but I'm also very social. I'm really more of a sort of a people person. I couldn't picture myself in a laboratory research career.
Yeah.
But I think what really clinched it for me was I took an EMT, an emergency medical technician course when I was, I think, a sophomore in college. And I was so amazed by the way these guys were able to use basic medical and science knowledge and just their five senses to help people and really sometimes save people's lives. So that really turned me on to wanting to be a clinician, and I wanted to dig deeper. And I think that's where it all started. I think that's where I really found my strongest inspiration to pursue medicine.
Yeah, that's great. And there seems to be a common narrative on what inspires people to pursue this professional path, and specifically on how many doctors are driven towards this idea of helping people. That seems to be a motivation for many of us, I will say.
Absolutely.
And what do you think, in your own words, what are the characteristics that make up a good doctor from your experience?
Well, I probably would have answered that question a lot differently maybe 20 or 30 years ago. But now I think, I guess assuming a certain, kind of basic level of clinical competency, I think I'd probably have to give my vote for humility and professionalism, and communication skills is probably my top three. And probably, in addition to that, it would be just a passion for lifelong learning and an interest in reflection and ability to adapt and change and evolve.
Yeah, that's great. I love that answer. Why do you? So it seems that your perception about what makes a good doctor has changed over the years. Why do you think that happened to you?
Well, I think in medical school and in residency, I really I was driven to just know as much as I could know. I wanted to know everything and to be able to fix everything. Most of the mentoring really that I received at that stage of my career was really focused a lot around being smart and having the answer at the snap of a finger, being able to do. But I think what I've learned in later years of practice is that there's a lot to just being present with patients, cultivating relationships with them, listening, receiving stories. And it really wasn't until later in my career that I began to appreciate those things. And I think that's what drove my interest in medical humanities, really. But, so I think I started as someone who wanted to do, and I've maybe changed a little bit or evolved into someone who really wants to try to be the best physician that I can be. And that is more about presence and relational skills than sometimes than just knowledge.
Yeah, no, I found it really interesting, and I'm at an early career. I mean, at an early stage in my career. Mm-hmm. So what I think it's fascinating is to think on how, you know, the way we think of what actually makes a good doctor can change over time, mm-hmm. and also how you know, the mentorship that we get also can influence that. And I wanted to ask you about the mentors that you have had at different stages in your professional journey. What can you tell me about your mentors, maybe at an earlier stage and maybe later on?
Yeah, I think my mentors early on were folks who I admired for their breadth of knowledge and for their equanimity in the face of crises, and really for their ability to just control a situation, make the right diagnosis, come up with the right answer. I think that's what impressed me back then. And my role models and mentors later on have been folks who've been inspiring more in the sense of how to have long-lasting connections and relationships with patients. I think one of my most impactful mentors really was my father-in-law, my late father-in-law. He was a family physician. He really practiced in a very old world style. He had an office attached to their family home, and you know, patients would pay him in peaches and, and you know, fresh vegetables from their farms and things like that. But he had just this presence with patients trusted him. You know, he was obviously a skilled clinician, diagnostician, a great practitioner. But I was so in awe of his relationships with folks and the trust that they had in him, coming back year after year for decades. And so I began to really find that I was connecting with that aspect of medical practice, and I started to, you know, read the works of folks like Arthur Kleinman and Rita Sharon, and I've looked for mentorship in people who can model those skills, even to this day still.
Yeah. So at what stage in your career your father-in-law started to have an influence in your identity, would you say?
Oh, yeah. I think this was I was probably about maybe 10 years into practice by then, 10 or 15 years or so into it. And, you know, I had relocated into a practice in New Jersey, and I was, you know, newly married, and, you know, really wanting to plant my roots in a community and grow a practice there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a beautiful story. I mean, it's it sounds like a real honor having a mentor like that.
Oh yeah, it's special. I wrote a story about him not too long ago, and you know, it was he was a great inspiration. And I think when I started to take on this role of medical director for patient experience, I started to meet a lot of folks who were really championing patient-centered care and listening and skillful communication. that's been a real driver for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what about your role as a mentor? How would you describe your role as a mentor today?
That's a really interesting question, and I think ever since you invited me to do this, I've been thinking about mentorship and what it means, and
Yeah.
and how it's different maybe than teaching or role modeling. They're all the things we do as clinician educators. And I think what makes mentoring really special is it does, I think, require a relationship. I think you can teach skills without necessarily having a relationship with someone. I mean, sure, it's terrific if you have that also. And I think you can be a role model. And role modeling, I think, in particular, really goes hand in hand with mentoring, because if we don't walk the talk, then it's really hard to have credibility, as a mentor. But I think as a mentor, what really counts is having a relationship with the mentee, whether that's a student or a colleague or a peer, and trying to get to know them, meet them where they are, understand what the mentee's needs are, so that hopefully I can connect with them around what their needs are, and be a confidant and someone who they can feel safe around, to share maybe areas where they're struggling. And I think that's what really seems to be vital to having a mentoring relationship with someone.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, I think that's really interesting. So I mean, it all goes back to relationships at the
Yeah,
end of
it sort of does. It does kind of parallel patient care in a way. And also similar to patient care, I really think that the person who has to decide if the mentoring is working is really the mentee. Like, I think my job is really to try to do everything I can to facilitate that process. If I need to listen and try to engage and understand the mentee's interests and needs, but ultimately it's the mentee who has to decide whether I'm the right person for them.
yeah.
Sort of like patients need to decide whether they're happy with their clinician, feel comfortable.
Yeah, that also requires a fair amount of humility, I would guess.
I think so. I guess we have to realize that we can't be the right mentor for everyone. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
but yeah, you're
yeah,
right.
yeah. No, I love that, and I mean, you mentioned before, some of the characteristics of what makes a good doctor. And you mentioned humility and communication skills.
Yeah.
And it seems that to be a good mentor, those are also some require characteristics as well, or something that can help in that relationship.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there has to be some genuine interest in reaching out to the mentee and finding connections, and there has to be a real interest in meeting this person where they are,
Yeah,
and wanting to help bring them along.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it sounds like at the end of the day, it's about helping that um, colleague, that peer, or that student to
Right.
thrive,
Hmm.
and to find their own path, perhaps.
It is. It's really it's. I think it's a lot of fun to try to get into, particularly in my teaching role with the students when they come out to my office to do their primary care or medicine rotation. I love trying to get into their head and figure out what do they need, what are they interested in, and we're so fortunate at Penn that medical students are just extraordinary people. And they all come to the rotation at different stages in their clinical development, and they have different interests and priorities. And I really enjoy, figuring out how I can help them, really.
Yeah. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about your work as an instructor, and
Mhm.
how are you, helping students gain these communication skills? What are the types of things that you're doing in order to achieve that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. That's a really great question, and that's something that's definitely very meaningful to me as a clinical educator. In medical school, thankfully, I think many of the curriculum are including instruction in communication and listening and appreciating stories and humanism and things of that nature that certainly weren't a big part of the curriculum when I was in school. So it's really important, I think, for students to have clinical role models who are demonstrating that. And if they learn about these, if they sit in class and they're told, oh, it's so important to ask open-ended questions and show concern and engage with patients, and then their clinicians who they rotate with don't show them that that's important, and then we're not achieving anything really. So I am very committed to trying to show the students that those things matter. And it's not really a struggle because I love that stuff. So I love the connection and building relationships and trying to kind of get at the root of what patients are really concerned about. I tell the students sometimes that we have to go in there and we have to diagnose the problem, but we also have to diagnose the concern. Because if we don't know what the concern is, then we may fix something but still leave the patient unsatisfied,
Yeah.
or disappointed.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. And it's so true. I mean, you feel, I mean, you often, when you're caring for patients, you often have these algorithms,
Right.
and you know what to do. But sometimes, or if for that patient, what you define as a problem, it's not relevant and doesn't resonate with them, the effort might be futile in a
Right.
way. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. What about so? What are some of the challenges to foster these communication skills? You mentioned, the importance of role models, and having clinicians who are at a more advanced stage in their career to
Yeah.
embrace these principles. What has been your experience with in that way with other clinicians?
I think it's catching on. I think one of the things I like to do in my patient experience role is try to develop some communication skills programs for attendings, so that we can develop kind of a sense of community around appreciating the importance of those skills, so that we can, as a group, be reliable role models for the students. It can be, it's not always easy. It takes, humility, like you said, and and energy. And I think I have to be able to admit when I mess up, because none of us are perfect. In fact, the other day I was with a student, and I had been telling the student how important it is to do some agenda setting at the beginning of the visit, like let's find out what the patient's, concerns are, and then we can try to negotiate, how to try to at least address the ones that are the most important during the visit. And I made the mistake with this patient of overlooking that, and I started down the trail of I guess trying to solve a problem that the patient seemed very passionate about, and then towards the end of the visit, I realized that there was another very significant issue that they wanted to talk about. I had not elicited that concern at the beginning of the visit. So no, we went back to my office and I said, I made a rookie mistake on that one. You gotta just sort of call it for what it is. And so we had a great discussion about how, agenda setting is important. So sometimes the learning can come out of mistakes, and not just always being perfect all the time. So
Yeah.
that sort of touches on, I guess, the fact that I think as teachers and mentors and role models, we really do have to show students or mentees at any level that it's okay to be vulnerable and imperfect. And we, all of us in medicine, we tend to be a little compulsive and perfectionistic, but being a really successful or effective clinician, it doesn't mean you have to be perfect. And I think that's really important to get across to students.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important takeaway from this conversation. And we have been exploring the topic of vulnerability in our online community this month. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, being vulnerable, it's what makes you human.
Oh gosh, yeah, absolutely.
And
I think patients, they want their doctors to be human, I think.
I think so too. I mean, from my own experience, I think patients appreciate when you're honest, and when you when you just are able to recognize that maybe you're not sure about something. Maybe we'll make some tests, and we'll figure out together. I think those type of messages really help build trust in the relationship. So
I think so.
I totally agree, with what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point.
Yeah. And has there been I mean, you just mentioned an anecdote of learning from the experience with that specific patient, but I was wondering if can you think of any other encounters where the patient was your mentor? Have you learned important lessons from your patients?
Oh, I think that's a wonderful, wonderful point. Absolutely true. I think patients have been some of my best mentors for sure. I think I once had a patient in the office who had a horrible diagnosis, and I really didn't have much to offer him medically. He had like an advanced liver cancer, and things were not going very well. And we just really sat in the office for a while and talked. Most of it wasn't even really about medicine.
Yeah.
And when he left the office, he said he thanked me, and I think I might have even asked him. I said, "Boy, I don't really know if I deserve for you to thank me. I just told you some pretty awful news." And he said, "Well, that's true, but you sat with me. You listened. You paid attention." So, boy, I said, I thought about him for a long time. I still think about that periodically, because what a wonderful lesson that he taught me.
Yeah.
about the power of connection and hearing someone's story, and just being present with them
Yeah.
in the setting of receiving bad news. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right that there's no question that there is great mentorship to be gained from patients. Very wonderful point there.
Yeah. No, and I think it all goes back to also what you said at the beginning of the conversation about the importance of presence.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's I guess that's something that for all of us who work in medicine, it might take time to develop that skill.
Sure.
You know, so as a final question before we wrap up this conversation, I wanted to ask you, looking back at yourself as a young doctor, and in a way we have talked a little bit about this, but what are some of the things that you know now that you would have wanted to know at the beginning of your career? What will you say to younger doctors, who are starting this journey as advice?
Yeah, that's a great question too, and I have thought about that a lot through the years. I think that I wish that someone had helped me understand how important it is to patients to feel heard earlier in my career. I wish that it didn't take me so long, till almost mid-career to really understand that. And I don't think that I ever had anyone really role model that for me until much, much later in my career. And I'm always so happy to hear medical students or residents or early career clinicians write stories or tell stories about how they learned the importance of presence and just acknowledging someone's feelings, or making sure that they feel like they have been heard in the exam room. It is so powerful. It is so important in medicine. And the sooner I think you can grasp that idea, the easier it is to be happy practicing medicine. Because none of us knows everything. We can't find the answer to every problem. And honestly, I think many times patients don't always even want us to give them an answer. They just want you to hear. They want us to hear them. And that in itself is therapeutic for many folks. So yeah, I think if I had to pinpoint one thing I wish that I had been taught earlier on, that's it for sure.
That's beautiful. I really appreciate that, Jeff.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. No, thank you for joining us tonight. This was a really inspiring conversation.
For me too. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and yeah, just wanted to thank you for that, and for our audience. I just to finalize this first conversation in our Mentor Spotlight series. I just wanted to let you know that this event was brought to you by Ars Medica. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to nurturing the personal and professional growth of medical students and physicians. We host an online community where we bring together doctors, residents, and medical students to inspire and support each other in our journey towards a more meaningful practice of medicine. If you want to join, please go to our website. That's ars-medica.org, ars-medica.org. And don't forget to subscribe for our YouTube channel. Thank you, Jeff, and until next time.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you so much for the great work you're doing.